Hello. You joined me in the middle of doing some modelling, which is quite rare, as I like sort of buying models and taking them out of the box they came in and running them and putting them back in the box they came in, and then that being the end of it. But I'm actually doing some modelling. So what I have here, this is the heavy metal die-cast chassis that I got in the recent Rocket Railways mystery box. Having had a look at it and a look into it, perhaps, it says here, right there, you probably can't see it, but you just see that there is something there in the light. That says Mantua, I believe it is, M-A-N-T-U-A, which, looking up, is an American brand, make HO American rolling stock. And this presumably is a chassis from one of their wagons. I've had a look into one that had these sort of bogies here, and there is sort of a big, I suppose we have similar in the UK as the bogie tipplers. I think in the US they use them for wood, which has the same kind of bogie. So I think that's what this has come off of. And I've made a first modification to them. If you've seen that recent video, you'll have noticed that this had sort of American style sort of knuckle couplings, or KD couplings perhaps, on it. And I have swapped those out for these large D tension lock couplings, and the way I did that was just take the bogie off via the screw which is there. There's another little brass screw here, which just only takes really sort of 2 turns to come off. It really is quite small. And then this cover lifts off, and that allowed me just to take off the sort of knuckle coupling part that sort of sprung in there. And you can see here that this coupling is now just sat on there. It is actually glued onto there, but I didn't glue it like this. What I did was I took the other one out, I reattached this with no coupling in the place. If I can see if I can reattach that here. I think this screw is bit. And that then gave sort of the perfect rectangle, I don't know if you'd be able to tell, between these two metal parts, which just put the detail down there and put a bit of glue on. And that's there. It's an absolutely perfect height. Obviously it's at the same height as the old coupling was, and now that's sort of compatible with my UK rolling stock. What I'm doing now is I'm in the process of not reattaching this bogie to start off with. Process of doing that quite well. I'm now deciding what to do with this wagon and what future it's going to hold on my layout. Now my main layout, which I'm conscious has never really actually been shown on in any of these videos, is sort of a preserved railway, where, and I'm doing it sort of like one of the lower division preserved railways where they'll sort of run whatever they can. And my initial idea was to attach this refrigerated lorry trailer to it and just have it as a sort of like that. But I've actually since changed my mind, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a planked deck, which is sort of what all this pile of wood is for. At work I stole some coffee stirrers, did buy something at the same time, so it'd be nice to them. And I'm going to use these to make a planked deck. So what I'm going to do is, I'll sort of cut this video around, but now I'm going to show how best to sort of make some of these planks, and then we'll go through the motions of making this into sort of quite a nice, hopefully freelance-esque bit of rolling stock. Right, so for the first one of these planks, what I did was I just laid this across. I cut the curved end off, laid it across, and sort of roughly measured and cut the end off, and then used one of these as a template for all the others. So that's what I'm going to do now. First I'm going to cut the rounded end off, and to do this I'm using these sort of wire cutter bit of a pair of pliers. These are actually quite thick and potentially quite hard to get through. And after that I just sort of put it down, pick one of these are all roughly the same length and all roughly slightly over the required length, so you can chop them down later. I'm just going to score that now, then move on, line it up, the original bit of wood. And this is sort of a repeated process. I have pre-cut quite a few of these, but this should be the last one that was needed. one day I'll come up with a better idea of how to film these, which doesn't involve me sitting around this tripod and hitting it all the time, like I just did then. Now you've got all these sort of score marks in here. You can just kind of see the lines appearing and disappearing. I'll just take my pair of pliers. I was sort of doing this looking directly down on the pliers, which I'm doing here, so obviously you can't quite see this, but I can. I mean, it's most important, isn't it? If I slide this down and sort of put a bit of pressure towards me, it will catch that groove that I've made there. Cuts. That was just the wasted end extra sort of length part. Here's the next one. Lovely. Where's the next one? There's the next one. And again. That's all those bits of wood cut. So that should be enough planks of wood for my decking. So now I think it's time to move on to painting. Sort of the underside. Right, so now I'm ready to paint. I've got my paint here, Humbrol Satin 85, which is a really nice, I think just the right colour for sort of underframes and things like that. It's a satin, so it's a little glossier than sort of ready to run rolling stock, but it really does quite nicely replicate the sort of glossiness of the painted metal and wood that you see on preserved railways. So I think to paint this, what I'm first off going to do is take the bogies off. And I'm still going to avoid painting around sort of here where the bogey's attached. But now, there's not really anything that can go wrong with painting this. It's quite a, sort of, there's not really any detail on it. It's just to get rid of that die-cast colour, which granted is actually very nice, but obviously not the colour that I want for the wagon. Let's get the right paintbrush here. What ones have I used for painting before? This is a previously painted one. And I'm just going to sort of liberally apply this on. I'm not too bothered about brush strokes. It's just the bottom, and like I say, this is just to make it not look as obviously metal and die cast as it is. But yeah, this is what I'm going to do now, paint this, and then we'll move on and we'll keep going with some of the rest of it. Right, well, the underside is now painted and drying sort of on those sticks, and so it's kind of tacky to the touch. So now it's time to start with the deck. So what I'm going to do for this, I don't really have much method here. It's just going to sort of start off with a dollop of glue in the middle, sort of spreading outwards, it's all in one direction, like this. Just tubes pretty much at the end. Assuming sort of not much really is ever going to come into contact with these bits, that should be enough glue. And then just start placing these sort of battens in place. And I'm going to start in the middle as opposed to an end, because if you start at one end, by the time you get to the other end, you're probably going to only have the sort of the width for half a stick or what have you. And that would look weird for it to be a full one on one end and half a one on the other end. So all I'm going to do is start laying these down like this in this direction, and then when that's done, start going the other direction as well. So we'll come back when this is done, I guess. There's no point, all I'm doing is sort of placing them down and sort of making sure they're overhanging both ends to be trimmed down later. So it's not particularly hard, so and it's going to be easy to do without sort of reaching around the camera. So I'm going to do this, and we'll come back when there's something else to demonstrate. Ta-da! As you may be able to see, a planked deck. Now there is, starting in the middle, which was his one I think, and as you can see it's left a little slither either side. Now luckily I had two of these left over, and all I've done, I've already done it with this one, but as I have no need for this I might as well demonstrate it again, is just split it down the middle. Now it can be a little bit hard to split sort of exactly down the middle, but I'm going to shave all the edges on this anyway, which is why it's not a problem. It's all higgledy-piggledy like that. So just rest a craft knife on the edge, push down on the top gently, and it will sort of do that. Now it's a bit of a struggle to split it exactly down the middle, but just push down. There we go, and you get two roughly sort of. I mean, these two aren't that same, but what I'll probably do actually is use those two, look sort of the best, The other two are a bit thicker, and just glue those onto the edge. Now what I used for all of these was sort of this cheap Bostik, which I always rant and rave about on here. It used to be 50p a tube in Tesco's. I'm sure it was about £1 now, so I guess that's inflation or something. I think for these ends, just if for nothing else more than how fine it's going to be to get them on there, I'm just going to use this sort of tube of super glue. So in much the same way I have done for there, just a little bead. This is the gel type super glue, which is quite a bit better than the liquid type. Little bit of glue, there we go, on either side. And just now take these on the flatter edge, I think. Just pop one on there and one on there. Obviously, as these were two ends, one of them is going to be the machined flat side, the other one be a little bit crooked where it was split, but just like that. There we go. We have a full planked deck. Obviously we'll be able to shave the edges once all the glue is firmly set, so that's kind of how it is now, and it's probably how it's going to be for the next day or two while it all sort of fully dries. You can see on the bottom that's all looking quite well to do. A little bit shiny under this sort of light, but if I sort of block out a lot of the light, you can kind of, it's alright. It probably needs another coat, which it may well get, and then once all the glue's dry, you can just cut around the edge and have a nice planked deck. These I'll probably use to run up the sides to give it a little lip and sort of hide all the, no doubt there will be some rough edges even once that's done, but I mean, this already, of course it can be used because the bogies work now with UK rolling stock, but already got sort of the makings of a reasonable wagon here. I mean, my sort of pseudo-preserved railway layout is just going to be a general purpose flat wagon from sort of an engineering train, I guess. That's kind of the intention. Just sort of run it with whatever. I quite like sort of flat bogie stock. So yeah, looks really good. So that's what I'm going to leave that for tonight. And then when I next have something to show you, I'll be sure to do that as well. Oh, we've cut to a funny angle and I'm not on the tripod. You can see I've got this drying here. I've got the lorry trailer, essentially because it was the perfect length to weight down all the planks. Lorry trailer on top of the planks, it's back on its bogies to help the weight distribution. And then just this Ferrero Rocher tub that I use to hold all my Humbrol paints on top, holding a nice bit of weight, letting that all dry. When I run a knife along the edge here to trim all these bits off, if that glue is not 100% dry, these are just going to move. So making sure this is 100% dry before we move on to the next stage. Right, it's the next day. It's not full 24 hours later, but it's sort of getting on that way. It must be about 20 hours, and it's now, it has a nice planked deck. Probably should have put more glue really than I did, and I think maybe that when I trim this down some of these might come off, but it's looking quite good actually. I'm liking how it's going so far. Obviously another coat of paint here and there and on the sides and whatnot, but now I'm just going to trim the sides down, and that's just going to be as simple as, I know I just said that this wasn't great for it, and it isn't, but just a couple of passes should start to separate some of them. I think it might probably be worth taking the bogies off first to get a bit better access to the sort of undercarriage or the chassis or what have you. So as usual, just undo these two screws. And that's now I can sort of get right into the side. So just a couple of passes with this. With the chassis being die cast, can't really do anything to it other than maybe knacker the nice paint job that I gave to it yesterday, which obviously needs another going over anyway. So it's not like a plastic one where if you went a bit too far the wrong way you'd end up damaging it. This is kind of working. This is going to take some doing, I think, with the planking, but yeah, they certainly are coming off. There we go, and that's sort of trimmed flat. I need a little bit of sanding, and obviously I want to cut this out, but that's looking a lot nicer there than sort of that is. So I'm going to carry on doing this and again cut back once that's all done. Now, a couple of things have happened since the last video I filmed. Firstly, I trimmed all the edges on this so you can see they're sort of nice and flat, which I did. It was a lot easier when I moved the camera because when I film these videos I sort of sit around my tripod and sort of do things. The tripod's here. And it was a lot easier when that was moved to put the pressure down and cut, and so it was a lot easier than I made it look on camera. I then sanded the edges back just to make them extra smooth and sort of put a little chamfer on the edges as well, which I didn't do on camera, but I can show you the bit of sandpaper that I used to prove it. Didn't do it on camera for reasons of it would be very annoying and loud and probably difficult, and I don't think, I mean, you can use your imagination to know what me sanding this is going to look like, sort of like. So there you go. A couple of things have happened. I've raided my spares sprue pile. This is sort of spare stuff on the sprue, that's sort of loose bits from kits. And I was able to find some buffer beams, buffers and hooks, which I've put together. And I've looked on, and even though I'm assuming this is HO and a chassis, so the wagon could well have been wider than it, that does actually fit quite nicely on the end. I mean, there's a bit of stuff I've got to trim off of the back of the coupling hook, but I know you can, probably not actually because it's really bad lighting, but that does fit quite nicely on there, and I think the buffers will complete the look of this wagon perhaps. So I'm going to do those again, probably off camera though, just because what I'm going to do is sort of trim them back and glue them on. I've also cut these 4 bits, which I haven't quite decided on if I'm going to use them yet, but the idea is that, I'm sure you can see that these are ends and sides, which if I were to put them on would take this from sort of a flat decked wagon to something more like an OOA or OAA sort of steel carrier, so you can sort of see how that would look. I'm not too sure about that yet. The other thing I'm not too sure about is the deck is obviously looking a bit light, and I would like to make it darker but keep the sort of the minor grain that's in those coffee stirrers. So I have here some mahogany wood stain, which I think I'm going to try brushing a little bit onto one of these offcuts and see how I think that looks. I really need some new paintbrushes. All of these are a bit dead these days. I think to do this I'm going to put that onto this I can't remember how I use this to stain some furniture obviously, and I can't quite remember the consistency of it. It feels very watery. There we go. So this isn't an offcut granted, but let's just brush it onto there, because I have a feeling this is going to be, I thought this would be too dark, but actually that's it's not looking too bad like that really, is it? I don't think. Just sort of darken it up a bit. I think I'm going to wait till this dries, but I'm not disliking. I think when me and my girlfriend did this to the furniture that we did it to, you can hear my dog trying to break down a door. He's trying to get into a room, not out, don't worry. We like him very much. I think when we did the furniture, we put like loads of this on, and it was really dark, which was what we were going for furniture, so it's fine, but it's not really what I'm going for this. But I think it looks quite nice there, so I think I'm going to let that dry, and then perhaps come back and do the whole deck and all the other bits with that. So we'll have to see for that, I suppose. Right, so the wagon is done. I've set up a little sort of engineering train, and let's get it into frame on the layout and have a little look at it. So, headed by the Hornby J50, which is a really nice sort of big tank engine, and with sort of the Oxford Pilchard as well, sort of really chooses a size comparison with obviously a brake van on the end. Let's have a little look at it and see what I was able to do with what was effectively scrap from that Rocket Railways mystery box. So let's do a quick size comparison with the Pilchard. I mean, it is slightly longer than the Pilchard, and obviously I think the chassis for this was HO, so it's going to be slightly smaller as well, dimensionally. But I really like how this looks. The wooden tank deck is on a really nice heavy die-cast chassis. So, yeah, to me that is sort of the perfect use for something that was just going to go to waste otherwise. So I'm really pleased with this, and I'm sure this will feature on sort of generic engineering trains on the channel in the future.